module, ITOM for IT operations management, for increasing cloud visibility and reducing costs. My name is Casey Johnson. Today it's going to be myself and Christian Malone talking. And I know a lot of folks have seen a lot of these webinars. So we're just going to go through a couple introductory slides, and then we're going to try to get as quickly as possible to a demo so you guys can see exactly what the tool looks like and how it operates. And then we can go through questions, a question and answer. So with that, Christian, let's go to the agenda. Oops. Right, so we're just going to have an overview real quick of the Tech Talk series. Then we're going to go through, kind of why we're here, and then we're going to go through, how we increase cloud visibility, how the tool works, how we really use it to increase the capability and affect the mission. The demo. So let's go to the Army Tech Talk series overview. So we have 3 more Tech Talk series on the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. Next week on Thursday, same time, same place, is ServiceNow SecOps. Then on the 22nd, we're going to focus on machine learning and AI, which I think will be a really good talk. I'm excited to watch that one myself. And then finally, the last one on 10/29, myself and Dan will be back here again to talk through continuous monitoring, governance, risk, and compliance, which is something that a lot of us has to deal with day to day in our jobs. So yeah, I encourage everybody to attend. We have the URLs there. If you need an invite, please let us know. You can always email us at armyteam@servicenow.com, and we're happy to get back to you and help you get in. All right, so let's go through why we are here. Right, so the Army is going through a huge modernization phase, right? And at the highest level, we're moving to the cloud, right? So here's a quote from the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy: "Cloud technology is the foundation for the entire modernization endeavor." And what that really leads to, people always say the cloud, the cloud, the cloud. It's not one cloud, right? You end up with many clouds in a distributed environment, right? And the IT operations team needs a way to manage that cloud. They need a centralized tool. They need transparency. They need something to be able to see across clouds, containers, serverless compute, Kubernetes, right? They need to see what's changed, what's the inventory. They need to track certificates, all of that, right? That's their job, right? Because they need to make sure that while they're providing the functionality that supports the mission, that it's secure and that it's managed and that, you're really reducing cost, right? So the benefits of that is, hey, we need complete visibility of how we're spending our money, right, across all these clouds to make sure you're not just sending money to, a provider, when you're not using their technology, right? That helps you eliminate the waste and save those resources so you can spend them somewhere else, put that money towards helping the mission in a different way, right? And then it's really working towards that common platform, right? Which is what ServiceNow really helps you do, to have that single pane of glass, if you want to use that terminology, but really that platform of action to say, okay, we have a problem here. We can see, from IT operations point of view, that we need to make a change. That's great. That change can be directly linked in ServiceNow, and then the governance that monitors that change can go ahead and get implemented. It's really about the team, the tools they need, and the experience they expect, right? And this is just for the modern age, right? For, hey, many clouds, we're trying to modernize. We need a tool that does that. It's pretty much as simple as that. So let's go ahead and see where we are here. So many of you have seen this slide before. We've actually had a couple additional line items here that haven't been added yet. But just to let everyone know, sometimes it's hard to see, hey, I've heard of ServiceNow. Is that something the DoD is using? And it is, right? It's growing inside the Army. The Army's doing a great job, implementing it and becoming more effective using it. But then also across other DoD customers, the Air Force, the Navy, it's really helping pave the way to move forward. So with that, And again, this is a recording. We can obviously send these slides out to everyone also in case you wanted to take a look at these more closely or contact somebody and say, hey, that's my area. I want to, where is ServiceNow? Maybe I can, leverage that where I'm at. Certainly open to that conversation. And yeah, please do reach out at teamarmy@servicenow.com. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it to who is operations expert. And we're going to go ahead and just do an overview of ITOM, and then we'll go ahead and get to the demo. So with that, Christian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody for spending your time with us today. I'm going to do the slides, just click through here because I have an instance open and I don't want to go full screen and mess up Teams. Quick background on myself. I don't have a bio slide, but I was a customer before joining ServiceNow, and I actually was able to deploy our cloud management solution then. I actually, before that, had built some custom integrations into ServiceNow. So I'm happy to tell you how not to do it, learned from our mistakes, convinced leadership to go ahead and fund the appropriate best practice way to do it. And what was great with seeing both ways was that I was able to then, once when we went to back to the out-of-the-box way to integrate our cloud environments with ServiceNow, I was able to spend my time and our development time on focusing on extending that. And it was such a huge change for us. We actually were able to do things that are just now becoming ServiceNow capabilities. So really gives you an idea that if you start with out of the box, you get a huge lift, and that whatever time you spend on configuration really is just a plus on top of that. So we'll focus today on IT operations management optimization, which includes cloud provisioning, cloud governance, and cloud cost waste control. Along the way, I'll talk about some of our other IT operations management, since cloud is not specific to just provisioning and just cost. It's also where you are moving your services to. And so it absolutely is part and parcel of our visibility and our health conversations as well. In fact, whenever I was a customer and I thought we were going to spend most of our time on building a cloud catalog, we actually ended up spending 75% of our time on building cloud visibility. Turned out that it was far more important for us to have visibility into our cloud estate, whether or not it was requested through a catalog, or it was done directly through the console, or it was done through a Terraform or a CI/CD pipeline process. So we'll definitely start with that today. Quick challenges that we see from our customers. Again, that lack of visibility, complexity in repair time. So this would be, when it was in the data center, we could get our hands on it, we knew what to do, we moved it to the cloud, and now there's new monitoring tools, there's new ways to incorporate and how we service those applications. Maybe it's lifted and shifted, maybe it's refactored, and not all the teams are in both mindsets at the same time. In addition, this is something that we found out, was that you could have out of control cloud costs. This is not a CapEx where you order something, put it on the budget, and you depreciate it over 5 years. This is, if you want it, you can click a button and you'll start getting charged by the second. And so this is a real shift in how we work. We found that out because we ordered some custom, actually EC2, they were custom built with some graphics cards. Amazon was more than happy to accommodate us. There was a cost associated to that. We handed those over after we provisioned and built them to our service provider or our application team who was going to be incorporating them into a project. We checked back after a month or two because we got some pretty high bills. And by high, I mean about $250,000 just for those servers. And the response was, oh, we're almost ready to put some code on them. Lesson learned. They sat and cost us $250,000 just doing nothing. No code was even putting on, they had no purpose. So after that, we had a policy, everything starts shut down, and you tell us when you need it, and then we'll turn it on for you. So that's one of the many things that are now a part of their Cloud Insight capabilities. As well as that governance and that agility, that ability that you might take, and we see this often, we had this where it takes weeks to go through the approval process to request, as if it was the servers that you'd have to request, physical servers, or has to go through the virtual machine team to have to go through and actually do something. And in this cloud, it should be automatic. If I request something, I should be able to get it within minutes, really. And we've seen that internally at ServiceNow. When I ask for cloud resources, it takes minutes, and I have it. I had that when I was a customer, and we had that in our virtual environment as well. I had access to an OpenStack environment. I had access to virtual environments where we had a cloud catalog. So really just taking those concepts and moving them into the cloud. The challenge being is it's not that CapEx cost. It is something that has those costs and that visibility concern. So addressing those, we get into how the platform as a whole sits within this view. We have IT workflows that sit side by side with employee workflows and customer workflows. App Engine, any of those workflows potentially might incorporate cloud. So it could be that employee workflows, users need access to cloud environments or cloud accounts. It could be that customer workflows, that your cases are coming in, they're dealing with a cloud environment or health of one of your cloud hosted environments. Within IT workflows, though, we're really diving into the meat of it. And this is going to be Service Graph, which is our new evolved CMDB, incorporating not just your on-prem data centers, but also your cloud data centers, as well as code as you start to move to a CI/CD pipeline and start to move towards infrastructure as code. Workflows and integrations, machine learning, developer tools, we're able to see all of that within the platform. And specific within our IT workflows, we're starting to see our customers move towards a plan, build, operate, and service workflow. So whether it's planning with our agile tools or maybe using Jira, having those stories become development in the build process. It could be more traditional, coming to a service catalog. We'll start with that today. And requesting cloud resources to be able to do some testing. It could be an automated process. We'll talk about that as well today. And then ultimately, once when something's spun up, we have to operate it. So that's the health of it. We have solutions that allow you to aggregate all of your monitoring that you maybe have traditionally, as well as some of your new monitoring tools, and see that holistic service view. And ultimately, that brings us back to that. Somebody owns this service that's now been migrated partially or completely to the cloud, lift and shifted or refactored. And really, their job doesn't change. They're responsible for SLAs. They're responsible for ideation and demand. They're responsible for the service itself. And those haven't changed when it's moved to the cloud. Yes, the costs might be slightly different. How things are being requested might be slightly different. Maybe it's a CI/CD pipeline versus a more traditional release schedule. But at the end of the day, those service capabilities that we have on the platform are still available and still work with cloud-hosted environments. So that brings us to our three key themes of IT operations management, which is that visibility to your entire estate, the health of those services, and optimization. And we'll dive into each one in a little bit more detail here, then move into an instance for a demonstration. For the visibility challenge, it's having multiple tools that can identify your environment. And that could be a combination of the APIs, the cloud service providers that provide you an API that say, this is what you have in our environment. Especially though, if you've lifted and shifted, they won't have visibility into maybe what you've hosted in their environment. They'll give you access to the EC2 data, but not necessarily into what applications are running or what software is installed in that EC2. So it's really a combination of those cloud providers, on-prem virtual providers, your more traditional data center discovery, and a group of other tools that come together. And when we don't have them all together, we end up with this repository, these silos, where some people know this. The cloud team knows the cloud data, the application team knows all the applications in the hosted, and that's just a challenge to work within. And so what we're able to do is to tie all of those together. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Most importantly, when we're talking about cloud, is the ability to bring in that cloud visibility. Don't make the mistake that I had an early vendor do, which was that they used to call the AWS API every 30 seconds because one day it just stopped and we had to call AWS. What did we find out? We were hitting the API too often. We hit our limits. We got throttled. That's not the best way to go about that. So instead, you could run through our software a schedule maybe once a day or twice a day to go and ask for all of your cloud visibility, all of the APIs, and populate the CMDB. But then throughout the day, we are able to have visibility into changes into the environment, new or deleted or modified cloud resources through integrating to the cloud events. And so that may be an AWS config, that could be an Azure events, VMware events. We're able to bring those in, consume, and then update them. So without having to call your AWS API every 30 seconds, we're still able to give you just a few minutes real time for any updates. So you're updating tags, you're adding and removing, you have that visibility in the CMDB. And back to that earlier point of you really want that CMDB to have total visibility into your environment. And that's not just cloud, that's not just traditional. That's going to include monitoring, that's going to include endpoint, that's going to include, as we mentioned earlier, your DevOps tools. The more visibility we have of data sources into the CMDB, the better off we're going to do. We consider this a multi-data source aware CMDB. We have some new capabilities with our new releases in Orlando and Paris, where we're calling them service graph connectors. I hope over time we'll see all of our connectors being rebuilt under this new program. But the service graph connectors give us the ability for a development team, for a data model team to review and improve these connectors and ultimately make sure that they all work together very nicely. So I'm very excited about that. Again, you want to think about this like a Venn diagram. A multi-source CMDB means that we don't have a single source, a single circle Venn diagram. We have multiple sources that we're able to compare against each other. And ultimately, I want that to be hybrid. I want that to be realistic. It's not just cloud data here and on-prem data here. It's not just inventory in different repositories. Instead, it's one place I could go to that aggregates that together and gives me some contextual view. And so in this case, I have maybe on-premise infrastructure that's hosting an Oracle system. Maybe this is made up of a stack of Oracle hardware. It's running Oracle software application that's connected to other systems and could even be hybrid with cloud and on-prem together. It's very common that we see that. And this map here, the service map, gives us the ability to see all of those and how they're interacting together. Moving on to the health challenge. I've seen way too often as people move to the cloud, organizations take one step forward and two steps back. I get it, I understand it, but it's still surprising to me that I'm able to see people who have moved an application to the cloud and they have less monitoring than they did when it was on site. And I think the ultimate goal is that everybody will mature to self-healing. And I think that's ultimately where developers should be developing into their code, that healing. But in reality, what we tend to find is that there's a pendulum. And that pendulum moves back and forth between it's the developer's job to maintain system health, it's the monitoring team's job or the engineering job to maintain service health. And a nice happy medium was where everybody's working together. And that's what our event management application allows you to have. An aggregation from multiple different monitoring tools, whatever group you're working with. Database team might have tools for them. The networking team is going to have tools for them. The cloud team, application development team. You're going to find a challenge getting everybody to agree on one monitoring tool. So rather than chasing that, instead have a process. I had a monitoring tool authorization where I didn't consider a monitoring tool to be quote unquote standard unless it was receiving or sending, events to our ServiceNow platform. And ultimately, we had to have a conversation around, is it helping us to truly understand service health? Or is it only providing a part of that picture? And do we have to have a more holistic conversation of, okay, well, you've refactored, you've moved to the cloud. Those monitoring tools are not going to provide us a complete service health. Let's also bring in a Cloud Watch or an APM tool or something else as well. Bringing that all together ultimately helps us to have a conversation this morning with one of our customers to get to that service health, that true service health of understanding whether it's up or whether it's down. And we're bringing that data from, could be container-based. You could have Prometheus monitoring your containers. You could have Kubernetes events. You could have that virtual environment. It could be metrics. It could be logs. It could be different type of monitoring. It could be transactional monitoring or real user monitoring. It could be simple traditional thresholds. It could be CPU is higher than 80%. Bringing all those into one place and not taking that approach of simply, okay, we've moved to the cloud. If something goes bump in the night, we're going to create an incident. The challenge with that is that your incident teams are probably already fairly busy keeping up with user-based incidents, user-submitted incidents. What we want to do is we want to start to transition. Don't just create more incidents by tying the monitoring to your incident process. Instead, have a healthy event management practice where it allows the tool to take those machine-generated events and deduplicate, correlate, group them down so you have an actionable grouped alert. That could create an incident. And then really helping on a platform like ours where you have changes, where you have incidents, you have problems, and you have these alerts to bring them all together to have a real view of, are users submitting issues and I have an automated monitored incident and they should really be grouped together on the incident side. Is this in fact a problem where it should automatically create an outage, maybe even before users are submitting? There's any number of ways that you can, on the platform, get a better view. And ultimately, underneath of this, we have data scientists that are looking at this very structured data that we're bringing in. We now have the ACC, our Agent Client Connector, that you can bring in directly from your servers, monitored events. We have log aggregation as well, where we can bring in logs directly. And again, we have all those connectors for your monitoring tools. And then our data scientists are applying these algorithms, this machine learning data models, so that we can provide those outcomes of what's anomaly and what's normal. Ultimately, that helps you to predict, but we want to go beyond predicting. We ultimately want to help to prevent. And so rather than just taking that, we'll throw all the alerts in a data lake and hopefully something rises to the top. We like that approach of finding root causes based on what's happening in the environment. Oftentimes, what's happening in the environment are changes. The changes often detect and become outages. And so one of the things we'll do is take those data sources. It could be DevOps, where Jenkins may be changing some config code. Maybe we directly, through discovery, identify that config data or a config file has changed. And maybe we're taking other data sources that are identifying changes. And it could be just a user submitted change record. We're able to take those and other data sources and correlate them together and create a root cause for you. And that root cause might tell you, yes, you have these alerts that are coming in, and it's because a change was made on the application about that time frame. That's what we used to do on bridge calls. We used to stand on them, pull our top tier engineers off of meaningful projects, and have everybody sit around until somebody said, yeah, okay, I made a change. And in this case, we're letting the machine generated data do that for us. If we can see what changes are made in the environment, we can make that correlation automatically. We can move towards an automation approach as well, so that we can start to trigger automations. They could be manually at first, but you start to have more confidence, and ultimately get to the point where you have good reporting about which automations are being done, which remediations are being done often, and you turn those into automated, so that when something comes in and it meets a certain criteria, you say, yeah, okay, let's have the system automatically try to fix that, and then if it can, we'll escalate it to a user. And here at ServiceNow, some of our more successful customers have really chipped away at the number of processes that their teams had to manually accommodate going through that approach. And it's just chipping away at that iceberg until you really get to that core. And it's not just automation in the sense of running a remediation. It could be finding the right knowledge base article. So using natural language understanding, so you have that tribal knowledge become codified and part of the system. And tier 3, or the third shift, might be getting knowledge base articles that were written in the first shift, and we didn't have to have somebody woken up to have to share that tribal knowledge. It could be just platform workflows, things where, as I mentioned earlier, maybe we want certain events that come in to trigger an outage. If I see CloudWatch say that we have an issue with our environment, we want to go and trigger an outage to say, yes, we have high confidence that an outage record should be there and visible by our users. And ultimately, our platform is a workflow engine at its core. We spent a long time building up our ITSM chops, but really ITSM was just the first application of many on this workflow platform. So it's really available to you to extend that into your operations workspace as well. And that brings us to optimization. So some of the challenges being, again, that lack of visibility, agility, and governance in those out of control cloud costs as well. So to focus on these one at a time, again, I thought when I was a customer, we were going to spend most of our time working through building a service catalog. It actually went so quickly. It met the needs that we had, our requirements so quickly, that we ended up spending most of our time on the policy and the tagging and the visibility portion. And then ultimately, we also had reports. We didn't have the ability at the time to run these really great Cloud Insights. And when I get into some of the things that we're doing and how actionable they are and our Cloud Insights product, it's really well beyond just cloud reporting and really able to have actionable insights that you can then remediate the issues. So we'll get into more detail, starting with Service Catalog, the portal. This is what everybody thinks of when they think of cloud. It is a standards cloud catalog. It is very similar to the service portal catalogs that we have, the service catalogs. The advantage of this one is that it helps you to do some day 2 operations. So the stacks that you've built, this allows you to come in and maybe start or stop, reprovision, set a new release date. So think about it like a service catalog plus. It's within our workspace environment, so it's a pretty standardized view. You can modify it, skin it however you want, have it include new icons or new sections. So a lot of customization that you can do. And there's also some pretty good permissions here. So if you have different teams that are using the same cloud catalog and you don't want them all to see the same items, you have permissions that allow you to say this group, maybe a development group, can see all the catalog items. This other group can only see the approved catalog items. And this other group over here will be able to see maybe just the cloud catalog items that they built or that are associated to them. Ultimately, the idea is that this is where somebody can come and very quickly see what are available to them in a standardized catalog, pick something, provide their variables, and ultimately come out the other side with either a pre-approved and auto-provisioned, or at least a process that started. And depending on whether the risk evaluation or whether it's approved or not, it might go through several levels of approval. But what we found is that this is decreasing the amount of time that people are taking to provision, from using emails and escalations down to just a few hours of provisioning these resources. The policy and tagging complete portion, I'm a big fan on. I'm hesitant to embrace tagging because I've been so involved in cloud tags that I know the limitations painfully, but it's a reality that tagging is a really great way to at least get you in the ballpark. I don't want anybody to forget that you do have a limit to the number of tags, and every group that I've ever worked with has different organizations within their organization. Different departments use tagging slightly differently. So we've accommodated that. But I still think that leveraging the seem-to-be as your primary source of truth is still the best. And then one of the things that I do is, let's say, auto-scale instances where something is spun up automatically. That's actually template-driven. We could get those tags done right. We would, at the time, use the tags from those to actually populate the seem-to-be values. So sometimes there's a nuance there where the seem-to-be is the source of truth, but it can be informed from tags. And sometimes the tags themselves are informed from ServiceNow instance. Good example of that being a service catalog. You can control so that nobody spins up that instance unless they provide those values. So it's sort of a do not collect $200, do not pass go. If you don't provide us the information we need for the tags, you're not moving forward. And I love that because I remember chasing so many people because there's missing tag values. And we had whole reports and whole teams that had to go chase people down to say, we threaten we're going to terminate your instances if you don't fill in these values. Well, with a proper service catalog, they can't spin up those systems unless they go through that proper tagging compliance, for example. We'll get into some more details about policies here in a moment. From a governance perspective, though, that's very important, especially if we're talking about the larger audience. You might still have developers and architects that are building cloud environments, especially refactoring, that are not going to go through a service catalog. They are going to be building things by hand. They're going to have keys to the kingdom. And you want to hold them accountable to the same rules, but you're not going to put them through a service catalog saying, well, I hope you can build it through all these component parts. They might be building from a CFT. They might be building from a template. They might be building through a different process that actually constructs more dynamically that environment. I don't want a separate process. I don't want my users that are coming, my vast majority of cloud requesters that are asking for maybe a very simple development machine. I don't want them to take up time from this cloud team that should be focused on refactoring applications. I want to send them through the service catalog. They have that governance applied, which is good, and it's very standardized. But I also don't want to have the team or multiple teams that are developing and building cloud resources that are going through their own processes, maybe directly to AWS or Azure or Terraform to the cloud. I don't want them to not go through that same governance. So that's what this diagram here shows, is that we have users, app owners that are going through feature release. They're able to build those templates. And then you have users that are going to consume those templates, and they're coming through a UI portal. That's what we're going to show in a few moments. It's a service catalog, and ultimately that provisions those resources. Why are we not also sending those development teams through that same service catalog? What if we could fill out the service catalog via a API process? And we'll start to show that today as well. That's what our most forward-thinking customers are doing. They're putting everybody through that governance. And what that allows you to do is to say these required fields, these required templates, rather than having some teams that we have to chase after, and then users that come through the catalog, they're always done right. We'll put them both through the standardized governance process. And we also have a white paper that will share you with how that's done best practice-wise. So digging more into the Cloud Insights feature, and we'll again show that as we get to the demonstration portion. We can break this up into several different pieces. The identify who's using the resources. This is also very critical because rather than just showing a report, and the reason why I don't like just visualization by itself is that then you have to take the action of tracking down those groups, sending emails, sending spreadsheets saying, hey, go fix this, and I've got to remember to go help you fix it. Instead, what we do with Cloud Insights is provide a lot of that governance policy as well as action within this feature, within this application. So identifying who owns these cloud resources is important, because if we want to take action on it, I probably don't want to unilaterally just take action and resize your instance for you, for example. I want to work with the owner to say, I'm recommending based on a policy that you should have this. Can you please add that? And then they can have a conversation with us about whether they decline, whether they accept. And if they accept, I don't have to get involved. If they accept the policy, it automatically applies it. That leaves me really as a policy engine. It leaves me as a policy architect where I can build these policies and allow the system to work with users. Makes me much more efficient. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm only dealing with the outliers. I'm only dealing with the teams that declined. Well, why did they decline? Let's have a conversation rather than forcing me to talk to everybody about why they should be doing it right. Let's get into some more details on these. So what we're seeing and why we focus on these features is based on the types of cloud waste that we see. This is not a cloud budgeting tool. What we've seen working with our customers is that you can be under budget and you can be super wasteful at the same time. You can be over budget, but be really efficient. Which of those two groups do I want to work with? I want to work with the inefficient group. Having the budgets that are thresholds are important, and obviously working with our financial engine, working with our IT business management suite to be able to control those investments and see the cloud costs that are there is important. But when I come to the engineering teams and the application development teams, I really want to focus on if they're efficient or not, how they're utilizing cloud. And so that's a combination of those business hours. That's an example where I gave earlier of systems that were up and they were being used, consumed. We were paying for them, but nobody was actually leveraging them. So a business hour would be appropriate there. Have no business hour for a while, then when they start to use them in development, that development team might be a shift. First shift, 9 to 5, what time zone, that's when the machines are on. After they're no longer testing the machines, why can't we turn them off? This is a different concept. We before I had the advantage of having this application when I was a customer, we built the same capability. And it really broke how we thought about cloud management because, before that, nobody walked through our data centers at night, turning off our servers before they go home for the evening. So we had a lot of processes we had to figure out with the CMDB, with our monitoring tools, where all of a sudden we'd be getting monitoring alerts saying the system's not reachable. Yeah, the cloud team is turning it off to save money. And so think about what that means. And again, here what we're doing is we're able to go through and apply those policies. We're going to automatically go to AWS, your cloud provider, on that scheduled hour. We're going to go ahead and shut down that system, bring it back up on the scheduled hour. But there might be other parts of your programs that you need to look at to see if you can accommodate that. Reserved versus unreserved, unidentified, things we don't even know why they're there, legacy instances, and then right sizing. And right sizing is one of my favorites because that's what we've seen a lot of. We've seen a lot of mentality where unless we handhold everybody through their requesting and unless we put project management and heavy oversight, if we leave it to users, oftentimes what they'll do is over-provision their instances. And it's that mentality coming from that CapEx model. I had a budget and I bought many servers. And when I did, I bought for not immediate need, I bought for a few years out because I needed that server, that compute to handle. If I got that budget once every 3 or 5 years, I needed it to be okay in year 4. Maybe by year 5, it's getting a little bit laggard, but I needed to have it 4 years out. You do not need to do that in the cloud, and yet we see that over and over. So this is an area where we can apply some insight there and be able to show you using multitude of data sources. Could be CloudWatch data that's coming in that's helping us to identify. Could be that API call that we make that gives us the discovery of what the instance type of the server is. And we can start to identify you have a server that has very low CPU and a very large instance type. You would be A-OK likely if you resize that down to a smaller instance. And again, because we've identified that people who own it, it's a conversation where they can pre-approve that that's okay, their mistake, or they can decline it and say, no, we need it this size because of some reason. And so ultimately, this cloud insights, as we're talking about taking action, it doesn't just do it unilaterally, it does it through the ITSM platform. So your standard approvals, your users and groups, your automated remediation, which is workflows, the change module, for example, is taken into account, creating a change record for when we're going to resize an instance. You should have change records for every time something changes in your environment. And we're going to do that as well, but it's going to be automated. So you don't have to manually create those. The reporting back of that, and ultimately that monitoring, that alerting. So this is kind of what that Cloud Insights looks like. And again, those major areas, those analytics, the unassigned resources, the right sizing. We'll look at this in person in a few moments. And dive into those key areas. So identifying who, I'll show you some policies about how we're identifying who's using what, making sure they're the right sized. And we'll show you an example of some shutdown policies as well. One of the new features that we have that I'm really excited about is also the unused machines. So this is very interesting to be able to bring in now that we're bringing in CloudWatch data. We can see utilization by bringing that utilization data along with the status of this system. It's running, but it really has zero utilization. We're seeing zero data metrics from the CloudWatch. We can start to identify that this machine is probably left on. I will admit, in my own data center, I was very reticent to give up servers because remember, I only got budget every 3 or 5 years. So why, when a machine becomes, an application moves off of a machine, why would I immediately give up that good compute resource still? I might move it into the lab environment. Eventually, we might decommission it. But I'll tell you, things stayed powered on for a little bit too long there. And we see that continue into the cloud environments as well. So here we're helping to identify, hey, at least there's a conversation. There's an action that comes up that says, is this in fact unused? And you can always have somebody that identifies the true purpose of it. That insight's always important. With that, we'll get into a demonstration if there's no queue. And if there's not, we'll definitely save time for questions and answers at the end. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a very basic high level. We talked about this cloud discovery. Just to give you an idea of this new dashboard that we have. This is going to be coming out soon. We're sort of building out now. We expect to see Google and IBM, a couple other cloud providers there. This is just kind of a one-stop, nice little dashboard that shows you how many master accounts you have, how many child accounts you have. If you're working within a GovCloud environment, you might actually have that relationship between the commercial account and the GovCloud account. AWS organizations work a little bit different in GovCloud. So oftentimes our enterprise customers will have a lot of child accounts for one master account. And the advantage there is that you can provide credentials for the master account, and it will essentially go and automatically discover all the child accounts in those resources just by doing an assume role. So that's a very nice, efficient way of entering and managing these cloud service accounts. Able to see at a high level the EC2s that are on, and then we're able to see history over time of what's been discovered. With OS, so what types of OSs we have out there. And right now we're building this dashboard to be a little bit more traditional, so it's a little bit more EC2, lift and shift, and expect some more from us that are more Mode 2 focused, a little bit more Kubernetes data and containerized as well. Right now we have a list of all of those resources that are available. So it could be network interfaces, NICs, it could be the key pairs, it could be security groups, PaaS environments like your RDS, your databases, S3 buckets. We're able to pull all those in, and we're starting to have patterns that are released every month or two, and those patterns are adding a lot of additional discovery patterns that oftentimes for cloud, so as AWS or Azure, whoever it might be, releases new features, it gives us the ability to go in and quickly without having to wait for a full family release, like waiting for the next Paris or the patterns that you can pull down from the store, you can add it, and then you'd see additional resources here. One of those store patterns gives us the ability to pull in generic. So what that does is it brings in everything else that we don't know. So I was very surprised to see that AWS has a service for satellite data. We wouldn't have a seem-to-be configuration item for satellite data. It's kind of a new thing that a lot of our customers are doing, but that would be pulled into our generic view. And then from that generic view, you could manage it, and you could even reclass it from there. So taking another view at how users would normally interact with our cloud management solution would be here with our cloud user portal. So as a cloud user, I'm going to come here based on my team. I will be able to see certain views. I'm an admin right now, so I can see mine, my groups, and all. But if I was to go in and change and impersonate a different user here, so I'll come in as Melissa. And then this is going to load me up as Melissa. And if I come back over here and reload this page, now I'm impersonating what Melissa would see as a cloud user. She's not going to be able to see an admin portal button. She's not going to be able to see all the views. She's only going to be able to see mine. And you can see test catalog, for example, will now go away. She doesn't have permissions to see that. So I have a lot of flexibility. I can make different categories. I can just have permissions where things show up or they don't based on the groups that I'm in. And the advantage there is that you can just use the standard users and groups in ServiceNow. Just by adding a user to a group, which is a very standard thing to do in ServiceNow, your admins know how to do that. You can even have that automated through your own service catalog. I'm now inheriting the permissions. So if I get added to the Cloud Designer group or I get added to the Cloud Designer group, I'm going to automatically pop in and be able to see additional catalog items that I can interact with. So going into one of these, We'll go into this simple web app, MySQL. And then in a few moments, I'll show you how to generate one of these on your own. What this cloud catalog does is it gathers this general information first. And so you have a lot of control over what you want to show here. So Melissa, for example, is not in a user group. So unfortunately, she doesn't have a quota assigned to her. That's the first thing I'd want to fix there. Second thing I'd want to do is to make sure, example here, I do have a user group that she can pull from. So she's now assigning that. I have mandatory fields, these little asterisks here. So I can say you have to have a schedule. Remember my comment earlier about, we spent $250,000 on things that should have been shut down. By making things mandatory, again, they cannot provision this through this process unless they pick those. You can get more granular here. You can have dependent fields. So I could say, is this production or development? If it's production, then maybe I give them the ability to choose always on. This is something that's going to be incurring costs in the cloud 24/7. If it's not production, maybe I do not allow that except for with an exception process. Maybe I only make 8 to 5 or some sort of schedule available for them. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility here. And again, it's very easy for your BAs or your developers to do this through mostly a no-code or low-code environment. This is a very simple interface to work with. And things like the application, the cost center, the business service, some of the very first things we're doing here, just examples. These are things that get added to the tags and allow you to help to identify which application might this belong to, which cost center is paying for this, what business services is this a part of. So I'm going to add a name here. Moving to the next stage here, after I do all the mandatory items, is I get to add the provisioning details. So this is where, if you're working with a template, you could derive some of these fields. You can have some of them hidden. You can have some of them don't show up on the form at all. When somebody enters something in, you can go through a process of validating. Did they enter the right thing? Does it meet your naming convention? And again, these are also dependent fields. So when somebody picks a certain item, you can have other fields that then are derived from that. It's a very common purpose. From here, I'll simply submit, and submitting this will essentially go through that approval process, identify policies out. That's either going to go out through our automation to AWS directly through a CFT, Cloud Formation template. It's going to go to Azure through a Azure template, or it's going to go through any number of actions through like a Terraform, for example. So I want to go back here and show you as a user, I'm able to see my most recent stacks that I've spun up. I'm able to see how I'm doing against my quota. I'm able to manage the stacks that I have. And Melissa here is not an administrator, so she's not able to see everybody's system. She's only able to see what she's spun up. And some of these are active, so I'm able to see some of these, and then I can day 2 operations on these. So if you're going to take away the keys to like an AWS console for some of your users, you need to provide them those basic things that they're going to come in and do. Otherwise, they're going to come right back to your team and bug them about, hey, I need to extend my lease. Hey, I need to do this. We want to automate all those processes or give it as a self-service option for those users. So here I can come and make changes individually. I can come over to my entire stack. And from that entire stack, I can make some day 2 operations here, starting and stopping, deprovision. I'm done with it. Modify the schedule. I actually need to up my testing time. I need this to be available 24/7 for the next week, or modify my lease. I need to extend. I need to have this for a little bit longer, or I'm done with it. Let's shut it off. And ultimately, I'm able to see from a dependency view all of the resources that are available in the stack. And if we tie in that additional visibility, where discovery would go out to your data center and it would identify what applications are running on this virtual machine, this would also extend further up into not just the stack, but also the applications, from the applications to the services. We'll show that in just a few moments. All right, from here, I'm actually going to go back and end my impersonation. I'm going to go back to an admin view. I like having admin power. I'm used to that. We'll reload this page here. Oh, look at that. I'm a system admin. I have example, I have advantage of an admin portal. Let's go click on that. Let's see what happens. Similar view, workspace. You can skin this however you want. You can add and subtract from it. But the advantage here is that this is the interface that your admin, your cloud admins would have. We have several different roles: cloud architects, cloud designers, cloud operators, and depending on access to certain administration tabs here or not. So again, what cloud policies, permissions, quotas, I can manage those all from here. Very easy to work within. What I'm going to do is maybe hop into cloud accounts just to show you an idea, another view. Adding cloud accounts are easy. I add a service account, which are the credentials. Then I go in and I add a cloud account itself. I choose which data centers I want to work with. If you're GovCloud, probably be East or West. You can choose so that people are not accidentally provisioning resources over in other regions that they can't. And then ultimately here, I'm going to work with my capacity limits. I'm going to work with my discovering. And these resources here are the same as what you saw in that earlier dashboard. This is a by service. And so if I go and look at the virtual machine instances, I'll see a status of the virtual machine instances for this account. So very easy to work with here. Very easy to build the schedules we talked about earlier. Very easy to add additional resource pools. Very easy to go in and work with this as an admin. You don't have to hop around the platform. You don't have to move around different configs, and you're not really doing anything behind the scenes in scripts. They're all available right here in this interface. So we're going to hop to it and look at cloud catalog items. So we used to have several different ways to build cloud catalog items. We used to have a blueprint designer where you kind of drag and drop on a canvas, and what that people really embrace native templates. While everybody wants a cloud agnostic solution from governance, from policies, from reporting, cost, I want to be able to have similar governance, whether it's AWS or Azure. At the same time, what we've seen is our users embrace those cloud native templates. And that really is the best way to make sure you have full feature capability. When AWS releases a new service or Azure, they make sure it's available immediately in CloudFormation templates or ARM templates. So it's a really great way to work with them. And now we really embrace that. We've always done that, but now we sort of put that forward as the best practice. And to do that, I'll come here and add a new cloud catalog item. We'll name this whatever we want. Seems good for today. And I can choose the category. You remember on that left-hand side, I could choose what categories. That's a simple list. So if I wanted to add to this list, I click the new button. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be categories based on the type of resource. It could be categories based on your organization, departments. It doesn't really matter there. What catalog do I want to put it in? We have a cloud service catalog and we have the traditional service catalog. So it's now available to be in both. I'm going to just hop into two choices here, cloud template, and that's an ARM or CloudFormation, so AWS or Azure, or configuration management template. Super excited about this. Ansible Tower can have templates, Chef or Terraform. Super big fan of Terraform. 5 years ago when I was doing this, we were using Terraform back then. It is pretty standard in this environment, and it really has a tremendous number of APIs abstracted that you can work with. So this really opens up a tremendous number of items that we can go and automate well above and beyond just your traditional AWS and Azure services. But for today, I'm going to stick with just a basic, let's say, CloudFormation template. I normally put a short description here. Today, I'm not feeling very descriptive. I'd add an icon to it. We're going to skip it for today. I'll hit the save button here. And that is really all that's needed for the start of a cloud service catalog item. Only other thing I need to do, I'm going to give it the actual template. So I'll come down here to Cloud Templates, click the new button, choose how I want to give it this template. Maybe an import from a URL. Maybe you have a GitHub repository where you are building these templates more dynamically. I can import it from those, so that's helpful. I can use a template body or I can upload a file. I'm not going to copy paste it in. I'm going to upload a file. I have one here on my desktop. We'll just use that for now. It's a fairly simple example, but CloudFormations are pretty easy to work with in. It's a very standard format. You can see it here. It's a JSON format. And we really support everything that's available within CFT. I will show you something here that's different. You'll notice that this section here, data source is coming from, same thing with network, data source is coming from, rather than being declarative, which CFTs are generally, for example, my type of instances are allowed, it declaratively says, these are the allowed instances, and I have to manage that through the template. We have an advantage that when we import in CFTs, we can actually have these metadata lookups. And it's basically just saying, you know what? We've already done discovery. We already know the key names that are available. We already know the networks that are available. When a user picks the logical data center, go and give them the right key names for that data center. Give them the right network based on what they choose. So I find this to be a very helpful way of simplifying these CFTs. Other than that simplification, these CFTs are exactly like you would get from AWS, and we often import them directly from AWS's template site. I'll activate this. It'll take a few moments here because what it's doing is parsing. And you can see here at the bottom what it's doing. It's looking for parameters out of there. There's my key name, for example. And how does it get that value? There's that lookup. Instance type, how does it get that value? It's not a resource pool, it's a list. It's a list coming from the actual CFT. And there's that list that's available. I have air type, regex, so that's what I can do to make sure how does a user, when they're submitting this, provide the correct SSH, for example. It has to be an IP address. And you have full feature here if you want to correct this if it's not coming through your CFT. Most often your CFTs will be built in such a way, or you'll get them from AWS, or they can be built from existing environments that you build manually in AWS and then take a snapshot essentially and create a CloudFormation template from that. So we'll give this just a few more moments. It's going to go ahead and build this out. Then I have a cloud catalog item that I can work from. In the meantime, while it's doing what it's doing, I'll just pop around. I guess I'll do this first, then head over to some other items. I'm going to click the Activate button. Sure, looks good to me. Save this off. And then from here, I have a Try It button that will actually open it up and we can see what it looks like. I'd actually like to show you at the bottom here. Again, very simple so far. I've clicked, what, 3 or 4 clicks. Haven't done anything complex. I've imported a CloudFormation template, which is, again, the AWS or the Azure ARM template, best practice of how to do that. I have variable sets. These are those 2 sections. I could add additional sections. Personally, I like to add monitoring as another section and have some variables in my CloudFormation that require CloudWatch, for example, so that people can't submit, let's say, production servers without CloudWatch enabled for it. So that's something I like to add here. We have different rules. We have different lifecycle operations. So there's our deprovision start stop that I could add. And then here's our categories. This is going to end up under compute. So fairly easy. If I go back to that cloud catalog, let's go back here to user portal, go back to launch a stack, and there's my Army Tech Talk. So I didn't give it a good description. I didn't give it a good logo, but that's pretty easy to add. Click the launch button. It's what we expect. This is a CFT template, so it's only giving me AWS accounts to pick from. When I pick that AWS account, you could have multiple. It would give me the location, only the locations you're allowing. It's still requiring things for me to pick from, and still has mandatory fields. When I go to provision, here's all the items that are in the CFT, and you saw how easy it was. It automatically pulled those in and parsed them and said, hey, this list of instances, that's declared in the CFT. This SSH, you type in yourself, but there's regex there that makes sure you actually type in a proper site or network. This network, this is a good example of a dependent field. Here it's subnet 1, but if I change this to management VPC, you'll notice there's a dependent field there. And this is one of those resource pools where it's using discovery to automatically identify our true networks that we actually have available. And from those networks, we know what subnet pools. So this is all coming from the SIEM-DB. Again, from there, I could hit submit. So you can add an additional catalog item in really just a few minutes. From here, this is going to go ahead and follow those same governance and those same policies that I've applied. If I wanted to go into my policies and governance, I could go back to the admin portal, go back to my governance, go back to my policies. And I have 2 places here. I have policy action scripts where I could go in and define some reusable policies, or I have policies that are here. Do I auto name? Do I set a release date automatically? What's my scheduling defaults? Really, this could be anything that you want it to be. And what's nice about this, let me go ahead and say that I want to edit this now, is that it gives me the ability to have multiple rules that are applied within these policies. I want to go back and create a new policy. I won't create a whole new policy, but I want to show you one new thing here, which is when does this policy trigger? And I really like the fact that these policies are not just at the time of submission of that form, but you can really choose where these policies are being applied. This governance is very strong here, where it can be either at the time that the catalog loads, beginning of the request, the end of the request, at the end of a lease of a device, when we do a task remediation and we try to resolve something. So really gives me a lot of flexibility. And again, I can have a number of policies that are run from there. That's all in addition to the permissions that allow me to see. Certain teams can see certain items, and I can have a permissive there or have certain items that are only available to certain teams. And again, my budget, my quotas here as well. If I'm a cloud operator and I may be on the team that helps to make sure that users are going through their self-service and everything's flowing properly, I'm going to have access to my cloud activities, a dashboard, remediation tasks, and trails, which go and really give me an idea of what's working, what's failing, and I can work with comments on these requests back and forth to users. Hey, you forgot to fill this out. It's not going to work until you do that correctly. And then it resubmits automatically. Or I could go through and assist and see if there's some sort of an error. Again, all done within this interface. We used to have billing only available here. I'm going to hop over to Cloud Insights for that. But before I do that, I do want to talk through, now that we are able to spin something up, what's the rest of the responsibility there? And that brings me sort of back to that visibility and operations and health. So if I go back and I look at, for example, this is one of my own hosted instances. It's a fairly simple service, a 3-tier stack, but it's all in AWS. This would be how it would be experienced after I've spun it up and it's now gone live in production. I could be spinning up just a small test instance and an application. I could be spinning up that CloudFormation an entire stack. I could be spinning up an entire VPC with a number of systems. You know, again, using those cloud native templates really gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. But what I like about this is that now that that's tied up to a service, I'm able to see that in my health dashboard. And when I click on that, I can choose to open that. I have that up here. I have the service map, and I'm able to receive a number of alerts, regardless of where they're coming from. So those CloudWatch alerts that will be coming in, maybe your traditional log alerts, maybe we have an agent on that system, maybe you have SolarWinds, whatever number of systems you have that are monitoring, we're all aggregating that together here. What's really nice is that behind the scenes here, this is an application, PostgreSQL, which is running on an EC2 instance, which is running on a virtual machine in the AWS environment. I could be receiving alerts at the AWS environment, at the operating system, or at the application, and they're all going to be rolled up to this application here. So I'm not having the cloud team manage alerts and the application team manage alerts. I'm having everything shown in that service context. So I think that's really important. And that really takes us to that next view, where if I look at that server and I look at its dependency view, here's that server. I've lost access to my I shut down my instance this was connected to. Normally you'd see a live virtual machine there, but looking up from that view, this is the rest of what you want to see. I want to see that I'm spinning things up in the cloud, not just for the sake of having an EC2 or having a container, but because that compute resource actually does something for us. And if I look at a more complex service, something like this, we can see that you can have that combination of Oracle, on-premise, we could have some cloud resources, and you can mix all of those into one area here. We're also able to support Lambda functions with their API gateways. That's an example of this here. We're able to see Kubernetes and containers that are all looped in together. So really depends on whether you're more traditional data center, whether you're hybrid, whether you're lift and shift, or whether you're refactored. Whatever combination of those components make up your service, you can still see in one health view here. And again, aggregating those health views, whether they're cloud events and monitoring, or your more traditional monitoring as well. So from that, I want to go back. Before we get to the spend piece, I want to, while we're here, focus on changes to this environment. So we mentioned earlier, and I have a white paper here that I want to bring up. Let me hop over to my white paper. So we have a more traditional white paper that we'll give to you that's about cloud operations and visibility and health. But I like this new white paper that we've done around DevOps and cloud provisioning and governance. And this really lays out what we're seeing from some of our more innovative customers, where they're using cloud provisioning in Terraform, for example. It doesn't have to be. You could follow the same process going directly to AWS and Azure. This we've seen before, which is, again, some users are coming through an API script, some users are coming through a self-service. They're all following those same governance and policies. And this is just a simple example of how that might look. It's a very simple API in the ServiceNow platform that your CI/CD pipeline, your infrastructure as code team, those developers can write an API post against. So very simple post, provide some variables, and they're doing exactly what a user would do, entering that form online. Now this could be spun up at any time through any process. And once when this cloud catalog item gets submitted in this way, again, it's following the exact same automation, governance, approval steps that you would otherwise. So super excited about that. And then just to hop back for a moment and show additional visibility we have. So let's say you're spinning things up through that process. We have two methods to give you additional visibility and make sure that that team that's provisioning resources through those methods are doing such in the right way. One would be that we have a DevOps application. It's available in our store now. That gives us visibility to those CI/CD pipelines. This could be CI/CD pipeline that's pushing traditional app code. It could be infrastructure. It could be cloud resource code. And this is an example of how that CI/CD pipeline is set up. You define the steps. In this case, I'll visualize that as a pipeline visualization. Yeah, I guess I have to relog in as in the site. Pardon me one moment. Essentially, what it allows me to do is to visualize this pipeline. And see all those same steps and all those same steps coming from real data. So let's go and take a peek here. Much better when you're actually logged in. And what this allows me to do is to see the number of build jobs that have occurred. Let's go back to one that failed. One of the first ones failed. Well, what happened? This visibility that it's giving me is, let's say that we're going to be provisioning, could be a cloud template, could be cloud resources, could be Kubernetes, could be anything. And along the way, I have a committer, I have a commit, so I'm getting access to the code repository, a GitHub, a GitLab, a Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, and I'm able to see that there's no work item. So somebody's committing something with no story associated to it. That could be a red flag. I'm going through this process. I have a test that's been done 100%. I could be getting that test data directly from your testing tools or from, in this case, Jenkins. And ultimately, Jenkins has failed in this case. It's not provisioned this. As I move forward to some of these other steps, I can see where they stopped in that pipeline. But this is far beyond just visualization. What this actually does is change automation. This allows us to say, in this example, I'm tying it back to a story. So I know the developer. This is unassigned, which could be a concern. Preferably, what I'd like to do is to be able to see this is a assigned story. I know the dev. I know what epic that story ties to. I have all of that, the reasoning of why that development was done. I have the code that was actually put, the multiple commits sometimes. I can see where they've gone through the testing. And then ultimately, before Jenkins actually pushes this out, or Azure DevOps, I have a change request. And that change request is an automated change that says, hey, am I allowed to change this right now? Rather than waiting for a CAB approval, or rather than giving everybody carte blanche to say, here, you can change as much as you want. Hope you don't make any mistakes. This gives us the ability to have some higher level governance. And so this example might say, are you allowed to push those changes right now? Or are you outside of your available change windows? Are there commit issues, conflict issues where there's other people trying to make changes to it right now and it will delay you? Or it could pull in additional information in the decision making, like your team has a bunch of failures, or you have a bunch of code that has no story associated or unassigned. You have complete control over those decision parameters. And ultimately what that change does is pre-approves, which is what it's done in this case, and it immediately goes. It might add a few seconds, but essentially it's immediate approval and provisioning. And it goes out and makes that change. And again, this change could be writing to the API that now kicks off a cloud catalog. And so you have this provisioning in the CI/CD pipeline. You have the additional governance and provisioning in the cloud catalog steps. This could actually say there's a high risk and say, I need somebody to put some eyes on this, or this could immediately reject it and say, this is absolutely not going to work. I'm going to reject it, and somebody has to come in and push this as an exception. So this is a great way to get that additional visibility. Another thing that I'm not able to show you yet, because we just haven't replatformed yet, is an additional acquisition. We've acquired 2 companies more recently that are very interesting in our IT operations management space. One is a company called Loom that brings us log analytics. So really great way to be able to bring in additional data that we maybe haven't had access to directly before, or aggregate data from other log aggregation tools and then bring them in and have more meaningful AI ops insights into them. The other one is Swiggle. And Swiggle is really interesting because it's a config monitoring and a config validation tool. So what's really exciting about that is you saw those resource pools earlier. If I go back to those resource pools that are here, and I go back to a user portal, I have to pick the right values when I go to launch a stack. And it's one thing if I'm a user and my user is using our brains, which are always really smart, and I'm able to look at this provision decision and say, yeah, okay, I know what subnet to pick, or I know whether this should be this key or that key. But these are all configs and they could be wrong. And whenever I'm going through a template, especially when I'm going through a template like a CI/CD pipeline process, how do I know the right one to pick? How do I know when the wrong one is picked and it doesn't meet policy? Like in dev, I want to pick this key, but in prod, I want to pick that key, or URL or SSH or something else. And managing all of those across all your microservices and all your refactored applications becomes a challenge because there's no tool out there in the CI/CD pipelines that does a good job with actual configuration validation and monitoring. Swiggle does that. It's going to be replatformed in ServiceNow very soon. I'm looking forward to being able to show you an example where we would go through and have a CI/CD pipeline. And that CI/CD pipeline would be providing data to an API. But the configuration that's being passed is pre-validated via that Swiggle. So if it's sending the wrong values and it's trying to push into prod with dev, or it's trying to push the wrong configuration in, rather than just doing a change request and saying it's high risk, we'll actually look at the configuration and say, that's going to cause an outage, and predict and prevent that outage by saying you can't pass those variables into this cloud resource. It's not going to work. So super, super excited about that. Okay, let's see here. Let's hop into cloud spend for a moment. I think we have plenty of time to do this and do a Q&A. So at a high-level dashboard perspective, never ever let the dashboards we provide you out of the box stop you from thinking you can just build your own. We're a very, very good platform. I know when I was a customer, we built a lot of our own reports. We loved giving business analysts and service owners their own ability to build their reports because, frankly, it was less than we had to do for them, and they sometimes know best what data they want to see. We might build data sources and help to build the data sources they would build from or modify, but ultimately I want them to report. Same thing here. We're providing you some out-of-the-box reports. I've worked with plenty of customers, including Army, in building some custom reports. Some of them we only take half an hour, and we're already done with our report. In this case, we're looking at cloud spend. I'm able to see some trending over time, and I'm able to go through and decide, do I want to see just AWS or Azure, or whoever my cloud providers are, which service accounts, which master accounts, regions, date range, and get some idea of our last 30-day spend, our monthly spend sort of over time. And all this data is in the platform, again, that if you want to visualize it in a different way, you can report it very easily. One of the more interesting things here is running some forecasting report as well, and being able to see per service account, for example, this particular team is going to be spending X amount, and it looks like there's a large predictive increase in their costs. And that's something that we can learn on and have a good conversation around. So the other piece I want to do is let's hop back into our Cloud Insights page. And above and beyond just reporting, let's actually talk about how we can manage that cloud waste. So again, very, very simple initial dashboard. It's all those key areas that we talked about before, those cloud spend analytics that I just brought you from. That's what this is. Those unassigned resources, which is what do we don't know? What's out there that we don't know who owns it? I like to start here, and the reason why is because I don't think I can right-size somebody's instance for them if I don't know who they are. And that's the first thing I want to identify is who owns what. Unused machines, business hours, right-sizing, all of those help to actually take action. We've added an additional step here in the most recent release, in addition to unassigned resources and those policies, is a little bit more simplistic. For those of you out there who have each account is owned by a specific group, this Insight Owners gives you that ability to map that one-to-one a little bit easier. I'm going to hop into the unassigned resources, show you how policies are done here. Very simple. I'm able to see in my first overview here sort of all of the pending assignments, declined, failed, which ones I'm reporting on only, and ultimately all of the policies that are applying to all of the resources. Then if I need to sit down with a team and talk just about them, I can do just that. If I'm going to sit down with the dev team, I can say, let's just look at yours and go through those. My policies are here. I can apply these policies in admin policies are going to be anywhere. Insight owner policies are going to be a little bit more specific. I'll go into the dev lab, for example. Super easy to build these policies. I pick the one or multiple service accounts that applies to. I pick a tag name and I pick a tag value. Super easy to be able to see anything that's in this group that has this tag equal this value is going to be put into this bucket. And ultimately what you decide to do with it is here in the actions. I want to assign a change template to them that maybe it's different from a production. I want to be able to assign a group and maybe even a user. And then how do I do that approval type? Do I send them through a standard change manual, or do I report on them only? Do I not actually take any action? So very easy to work from here, and allows us to take those tags, for example, and identify exactly. We can get much more granular. These tags can help you to identify groups. So maybe even within a larger Cloud Insights owner group, you break things like we are here into production versus dev. This group versus that group, refactored versus a different account for something else or different instances. So super excited about this. Able to see all the resources, and then from this view, we're able to see sort of the life cycle. So these are all the pending assignments. These are all the things that are out waiting for somebody to approve. Are you in fact the owner of this? People that have said no, people that have agreed yes. And then again, we can auto approve some of these as well, depending on that change request that we use. And I like this final one here, unassigned resources. This is the number I've got to drive to zero. I don't want to see any instances out there that I don't know what they are, who they belong to. Once I have an identified who owns what, let's look at right sizing. Big fan of this. We used to do this manually in my group or through reports and bots, and now it's built into the platform, which is exciting. Again, working provider or service account, confidence level. Maybe I say I only want to see medium confidence or higher. So I could kind of rule out the lows. So these are all the things that we have a pretty high confidence. What are we doing here? We're bringing CloudWatch data, those metrics. We're looking at the CPU, for example. We're able to see, this is over provision. This is an extra large, using very low CPU on it. And we recommend they move down to an M5 large. You're going to save $370 a month on this. And these savings really accumulate. You can see just through this medium and high confidence, we can save up to $11,000 or $87,000 total. So from here, again, this is not just looking at the list and you have to take action on it. I'm not really a big fan on the longer you look at it, it still just looks the same. These have these recommendations, again, a life cycle, new recommendations, recommendations where we've gone out to the owner and said, we'd like to actually resize this. Are you okay with it? And if they approve it, it allows them to pick a schedule, goes through the normal change request policy. What happens here is that we actually, at that correct time of that change, they get to pick maybe the window of when they would normally do changes. So it's when they get to select it. We're going to call out to AWS here or Azure here. We're actually going to take a snapshot of the system. We're going to then resize it. We're going to start it back up, and then we're going to evaluate whether or not that was successful. If it was successful, we successfully complete the change and let the owner know you're good to go. Or we'll go back if it fails, set it back to the last snapshot. It's as if nothing's ever changed, and we'll go ahead and set that as a failed recommendation. So along the way, we can have these conversations with declined recommendations. Okay, well, you, out of my total number of 100, let's say, or hundreds, 20 have said that they don't want to be resized. Only hundreds, 20% that I now have to have a conversation with to say, well, let's justify. Why is that the case? So that makes my job much, much easier. And again, I can track the jobs that are happening, the execution, and again, this all follows that normal change and approval process as well. So super excited about that. And what you can expect to see over time here is some additional features like machine learning. So maybe tags. We can show you, well, somebody typed this, but it's close enough. We actually think what they meant was this. So some good suggestions there. As well as I expect to see some additional data that's flowing in and some additional actions that you can take. So some exciting things that are happening here. I'm tracking with this team what they're doing. They're getting some really good suggestions from our customers that are using this today about what we'd like to be able to do with it. This all follows our concept of mission control, this concept of I don't want to just have visualization, I want to take actionable insights. And hopefully you see this as what I think it is, which is a recommendation engine. Ultimately, it's giving me the ability to focus not on maybe before I was a monitoring, maybe before I was a VMware engineer, maybe before I was a database engineer, but in this new world, I have a new task. I have to do something. I can't put CDs in servers anymore and load patches. And maybe what some of these users become are policy owners. I understand cloud, I understand compute, and I can become a policy owner that will ultimately set these policies, but I don't have to be a BA. I don't have to track everybody down. I let the system do that for me. And it really allows your team to be very efficient, wear multiple hats, and rather than having a full head count for some type of role in this new cloud world, you can have the team that you have focus as they have to across both your on-prem and your cloud and your refactored all at the same time. And that makes it more reasonable. So that's all I wanted to show for today. I'm going to hop over into Q&A mode, if that's okay. Give us about 15 minutes for that. Sound good, Casey?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you, Christian. That was a lot of information, and I think some of our attendees. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and
you did call it a tech talk though, right? It was a tech talk. I brought the tech talk.
That was. I learned some stuff. That was really great. So 2 questions. One, I think for most folks, they have potentially interacted with ITSM. Or maybe have that installed where they are. And the other folks maybe have nothing. So if you wanted to get started down this path, down the ITOM path, where would you go? Like, how do you start?
Oh, let me see if I have that up here. I think I saved it. Hold on a second here. Did I save it? And is it in this instance? Ah, yes, I did. CSDM Data Foundations Dashboard. You can get this right on our store.servicenow.com. Download it right into your instance for free. And our CSDM is our common service data model. We talked about it briefly before. It's what sits on top of the CMDB. And it really helps you to determine how the CMDB is experienced in different areas by different roles. And so that's where the CMDB, for example, and ITSM intersect. It's broken into these different phases: crawl, walk, run, fly. And by downloading this dashboard, it looks at your real instance data. It evaluates you against some of the key identifiers, indicators that we have. And you can kind of see where you are in the crawl phase. How am I doing? Well, I'm 100% on this relationship between application services and business applications, but I'm really bad with business application services with application relationships. And what's nice about this is if I'm not doing very well in this area, it gives me a URL. I can click that URL. It'll take me to the HI site where it's going to give me a knowledge base article saying, hey, if you're in this cohort of people that are having problems with this, how about if you try these things? And again, I can walk right up to the walk phase. I can run to the run phase, 2%. Not doing very well here. I've got some of the run things. Realistically, organizations don't move monolithically over. So I like this approach of starting to say, what are the outcomes I'm looking for? If it's ITSM, for example, is it manually incidents are created? Is it automating that incident process? Is it manually changes are creating? Is it automating that change process? And I think having that CMDB data, having that CSDM process that you're following will help you to have those key foundation pieces in place so that as you move from manual incident management and change management and problem to automated, you'll have those relationships, you'll have those configuration items there, and it will help that process. Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think that's a great overview of how to, go from ITSM with a CMDB and kind of for free to at least see what you need to do next. So with that, like Christian said, I had the first question, but I'll go ahead and open the floor to anyone else who wants to chime in or have questions for Christian while he's still sharing his screen. Anybody? Everybody's quiet during lunch. Okay, well, thank you, Christian, for sharing. We will make this webinar, it was recorded. We'll make it available to everyone so that, if you wanted to forward it along to a colleague, or if you want to have a conversation, just to see what's around or what's available to help you meet your capabilities. You can always email us at armyteam@servicenow.com, or the account executive who's on this meeting is Daniel Kunze. That's Daniel.Kunze@servicenow.com. You can email him directly, and we'd be happy to have a conversation. I think his information's on that first slide. Yeah. Happy to have a conversation, and just talk and see if there's some way that we can help you deliver your mission needs. But with that, I want to thank Christian again. Christian, that was a fantastic overview, and thank you for the demo. And I'll let everybody get back to their day. Happy Thursday. It's beautiful in DC. And we'll see you guys next week for SecOps on 10/15. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Dan.
Good job, guys.